This is Golden Years, a roadmap to navigate retirement with Mark Cordner, the podcast.
Some big news here. I guess big news and sort of a fear here, because there's been fear for years that when baby boomers retire, they'll pull money out of the market and trigger a crash. But the last boomers turned 62 this year. Many are already retired, and we haven't seen that happen. So what's the bigger risk? That this generation starts pulling more money out, or that they're simply not putting as much in as they used to?
Well, I think this dilemma has been a little bit overblown. I mean, it's certainly been a point of conversation for many years, and it's absolutely correct that as people age, they tend to just naturally go into more of a preservation mode. But I'm not seeing them pulling money out of the market so much as they are maybe repositioning that money. Now, in some cases, well, certainly we're seeing more awareness of alternative investments like structured notes, and we're seeing dramatically improved understanding of annuities and the role that they can play in a portfolio. So we are seeing money exit the market, but I think it's more gradual than it is sudden. And the biggest concern is we do need to have money in the market because the purpose of the market is to outpace inflation. I mean, that's the reason why people invest, is they're trying to outpace inflation. And if they're going to live 10, 20, 30, maybe even 40 years into retirement, then they can't suddenly go all to cash and not have their money working for them. And so, interestingly, this is a generation that has been raised over the last 20, 30, 40 years of really riding the market and getting tremendous returns in the market. And so I think we almost have the opposite problem, and that is that we need people to become more preservation-minded, and I find that it's a bit of a struggle to get people to shift, particularly men, to shift away from trying to chase sexy returns and think more in terms of preservation, because what goes up definitely comes down. We just don't know when. And the big issue in retirement is timing. It's when those negative hits happen that can be catastrophic if we don't have buffers built into place. So we've got to build guardrails into the plan. I call it a two-pocket strategy, where some money's in the market, some money's out of the market. And so these are new ideas for many people. I'd say, come visit with us if they are new, because really retirement is about risk management. It's not about assets, how much we have. It's about how much income we have. So it's a totally different game in retirement than it is preparing for retirement. Yeah, so I'm not particularly concerned about this fear of too much money leaving the market, but if these are anxieties that people have out there, I'd say give us a call and let us put together a retirement roadmap for you. We'll do a diagnostic report of your investment portfolio and help you understand if things need to be repositioned, if you need to be more conservatively oriented, more preservation oriented. And again, that's part of our complimentary service, that roadmap. So I'd say just, come visit with us, folks. We can relieve you of that anxiety.
Yeah, take that anxiety out of the equation, reduce that noise a little bit, calm yourself. Do that today with this complimentary retirement roadmap. That phone number, 702-996-4050, 702-996-4050. That website, of course, mygoldenyearsroadmap.com. Interesting, you talked about outpacing inflation. We all know the prices of everything these days is insane, quite frankly. Yeah. And when you think about it, both now, maybe you're still working going, well, gosh, I'm barely keeping up now and I'm getting that check every 2 weeks. Or maybe you just retired. And now you're thinking, well, wait a minute, is my savings going to work for as long as I need it to? Because at the end of the day, inflation, yes, going to take a little bit more money away quicker, but we are also living longer. And that changes how we plan for retirement. Morningstar recently asked the father of the 4% withdrawal rule, his name is Bill Bengen, what people are getting wrong.
I think many folks are not using a long enough planning horizon. They'll live to 95, perhaps, if they retire at 65, so they use a 30-year planning horizon. But what if they live to 105? Well, the last 10 years are going to be very uncomfortable if they have no money left. So I recommend that people build a margin of safety into their withdrawal plan. Take your life expectation, which you can determine over the internet, and add maybe 25, 30, 35% to that. So that if you're looking at a 30-year life expectancy, make it 40. 35 or 40, and that'll give you a margin of safety so you won't have to deal with some really ugly issues later in life.
Well, first of all, when he says you can do that over the internet, I want you to explain what and where this is, and also just what are your thoughts on this entirely? I mean, if we're underestimating how long our money needs to last, how should that change the way that we're building a retirement income plan?
Well, first off, I'm thrilled to hear that he's addressing this, because this is one of the biggest criticisms that the academics have had of his 4% rule, is that he had certain very limited assumptions back in 1992 when he introduced that, or 1994, excuse me, when he introduced that, and people are living longer. And so he references how we can go online. Well, I'm not going to say that these online tools are totally predictive, but there are tools like there's a website called Living to Age 100 or Living to 100. There's a number of these life estimating tools that can give us a little more informed perspective of our current health and how long we may last based on genetics and our current health habits and all. So they're informative. I think it's great. I always tell people, add 5 or 10 years to whatever you think your life expectancy is going to be, because the worst case scenario is running out of money before you run out of time, because then you become dependent upon other people, and that's the number one fear people have, far more than dying. They just don't want to become dependent upon other people, and so we have to keep money in the market. We have to think differently over the long haul. We have to start thinking more inclusively of all of our assets. Historically, people have not looked, for example, at home equity as being something that could be considered in retirement. We always were raised to, pass the home on to people, onto our kids, for example, even though 99% of the children statistically are going to sell the home. They don't want to occupy the parental home. And so we have to think differently about assets like that, because we're in a new era, really. There has been no time in human history like today, in the sense that people are wanting to retire, and not just for a period of a couple years, but for potentially decades. That just never happened in human history before. And so your general person out there in the economy has never been taught, how do we make money last beyond just saving it up? That's one thing, but how do we actually make it last over an undetermined time period? And so there's an increase in awareness of things like income contracts, commonly known as income annuities, that can guarantee us income for as long as we may live. There's just different strategies people need to learn about. So if longevity is a concern to listeners, I'd say definitely call us, because I consider myself a longevity planner more than anything, because that is the number one risk, is that most people are not dying too soon. They're living too long. Mm-hmm. We got to make the money last.
1,000% you got to make the money last. And that's where this proactive conversation comes in, right? I know a lot of people think, oh, I'm 55, everything's fine. I just got to kind of, see if I can coast until 60, 65 when I can retire, and then everything will be fine. Well, you got to think about the next 30 plus, 40 years. I read something the other day. This woman was turning 110.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think she thought she was going to live to 110. But she certainly did. And wow, you think about that. And listen, how do you plan for that? Because as you talked about here, the number one fear is being a burden on people, depending on other people, running out of money. Because at 85, you can't just pick up and go work at Walmart,
No, typically not. There certainly are hiring caps, and there are other restrictions like health issues and all. So it's wonderful that the people are thinking more creatively, but it's also sometimes sad, when I see people in their 70s advertising for roommates out of necessity. That's, it may be good from a social standpoint to have that companionship, but that's not what most people had in mind when they retired. And so, again, we do have to think differently. It's interesting you say 110, because I have an associate in my office. She introduces me at our seminars and all, and I often point to her because her aunt just passed away here about a year ago at the age of 110, and she was in full control of her faculties. Just very clear mentally and all, and the body eventually will give out, but we're seeing this more and more, that people are living. Matter of fact, there was a study done by Stanford a couple years ago that said half of the children born today will live beyond age 100. Half of them.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
It's exciting if we can live with quality of life, but again, we got to think differently. Maybe work longer, maybe work part-time into retirement. Certainly think about our money and our investment habits differently, because that money's just got to last. That's one of the things we do. I say, come visit with us, folks. It's all about income planning. It's not about how many toys you have or how large that pile of money is. It's how easily can that be converted into income. So a lot of vacant land or commercial buildings or whatever may not be great income sources, even though they look good on your net worth sheet. So it's all about income.
All about income. That's the recipe to having that successful retirement. Again, if you'd like to come in for this retirement roadmap, it is complimentary for our radio listeners only. This is where you'll have the opportunity to sit down and speak with Mark one-on-one. Let's talk about your fears, your wants, your needs, your desires in retirement. Let's talk about giving you the retirement you've always dreamed of and making sure that income, that money, lasts as long as you need to. 702-996-4050. 702-996-4050. MyGoldenYearsRoadmap.com. We all know Social Security is facing financial challenges with benefit cuts projected as early as 2032 unless some changes are made. But several factors could make the situation even tougher. They say more retirees are claiming benefits while fewer workers are paying into the system. We just talked about that, how the baby boomers are putting more in. Now they're retiring. That's going to be less in, more out. Lower birth rates that could worsen the worker to retiree ratio, and new tax breaks for seniors that could add pressure to Social Security's finances. Right now, Social Security makes up about 50% of the average retiree's income. Mark, do you see that percentage dropping in the future? And if so, what fills that gap?
Yeah, I do, actually. That's interesting. I do see that percentage of income dropping because of inflation causing cost of living to increase, and simply the mathematical stresses on the Social Security system are such that I don't see the cost of living increases in Social Security being maintained as high as they have been in the past. They're certainly not guaranteed, so there's some years you don't even get them. And, when we talk about inflation, we got to realize that the cost of living generally doubles every 20 years. And so inflation, just in general sense, is a big concern. But I think people are going to start being more creative when they're going to realize that Social Security can't quite carry them the way it has in the past. They're going to be looking to alternative investments like structured notes and fixed income annuities, for example, these income contracts, because we can generally get 2 to 3 times as much income out of those as we can dependably out of market-based accounts because of the variability in those accounts, forcing us to be more conservative in our withdrawal assumptions. So the big issue is that certain expenses, what I would call your dignity expenses, or certain base expenses that have to just be covered with guaranteed income. And Social Security is wonderful for that, but it's just not sufficient. So some people would say you ought to have probably 70% of your basic income covered with guaranteed income sources. I would say most people I talk to prefer that closer to 80 to 100% of their base expenses. So, so if $6,000 a month is your need, then we cover $6,000 a month between Social Security and private pension plans. And then we leave money as much as we can in the market to grow over time. But that then becomes the extras where we'd withdraw from periodically as we want to do those, special vacations or family events and things. But yes, I do see Social Security becoming a decreasing portion of a person's living income, covering less of their expenses. And I see people becoming more educated, which is wonderful. I mean, that's one of the things I appreciate about this radio show is we're able to talk about ideas that are not familiar to your rank-and-file Americans. And people are increasingly, I think, becoming more open to learning, because they realize the government cannot be there for us. We have to depend upon ourselves. We've got to take this responsibility on ourselves and not assume that we're in this kind of nanny state where the government can do everything for us. They can't. It's pure math tells us the government cannot do it. So we've got to think differently. So folks can come visit with us, if they're concerned about Social Security, how much they can get, when they should claim it, how big of part of their income projections that should take, then come visit with us. We can take the guesswork out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, no one has a crystal ball, so it's kind of all speculation at this point, but I think we do see changes coming down the road at some point. So if you are wondering, where does Social Security, or will it even fit within my income plan, my retirement roadmap, have this conversation with Mark today, 702-996-4050. And here's the thing, if there's a probability that it may not be, or not in the capacity that you thought it was going to be, you mentioned, of course, these private pensions that you see. For those that have a pension, very few and far between, but there's also some other guaranteed income options that you'll be able to discuss with Mark as well. Again, all part of that retirement roadmap. 702-996-4050. MyGoldenYearsRoadmap.com. We've talked about converting 401k money to a Roth. We've done that, but it can help with RMDs and make things easier on your kids when it's time for inheritance. But there's a tripwire. Convert too much and you could bump up your Medicare premiums. And now there's another snag. An article I recently read at 247wallstreet.com points out that if you're in the 24% tax bracket, your income is taxed in tiers starting at 10% and working its way up. But when you convert, every dollar is taxed at 24%. So really, you're sitting here trying to save on taxes for later. You may be paying more right now. Is that a real concern, or do the long-term benefits still win out?
Well, I think it's definitely something that people need to think about. This is a major part of my practice and has been for many, many years. We just did a case last week for a couple that, they'd be good savers, but we showed them how they could save over 600, and I think it was 684,000 that they would save in future taxes simply by doing these Roth conversions. And that's without tax rates even increasing the way we know they're going to have to. So their actual savings will be larger than that. So most people have anxiety about future taxes. I find this to be the number one driving concern for people. The number one motivator for why they want to meet with us is, how can we reduce future taxes? And the Roth conversion is a big part of that. So the basic idea is people have saved money in tax-deferred accounts most of their working career. That money, because it was deferred, has never been taxed, and therefore they have a choice. They can choose to pay the taxes now at today's presumably lower rates so that they can avoid taxes in tomorrow's higher bracket, either for themselves or for the children or grandchildren that they leave that money to. So the question is, what are the costs? So there's a tax cost, as you mentioned. There's also a Medicare cost. It's what we call income-related monthly adjustment amount, or IRMA. So there's two things we're balancing, the income tax issue plus also a surcharge on your Medicare, which is based upon your total income. And total income includes your regular income plus any money that is converted. And so, fortunately, we've got some very sophisticated software. We're able to run these scenarios, and we'll run like 15, 20 scenarios in this particular report we use, and we can show people, well, here we can quantify for you what the tax savings are, and that then makes it easier because in their gut, people feel like, yes, I want to get out from under the government's thumb. I want to pay the taxes now, get it behind me. But once we quantify it for them, it makes it much easier for them to kind of tear the bandage off and deal with the short-term pain because they can see what the long-term benefit is. So I would say to folks who are worried about decreasing future taxes, definitely come visit with us. That's one of the ways we can really help. We'd love to work with your accountant, and we do a lot of the work that the accountants used to do, and then we defer it to the accountant to be able to give that seal of approval. But again, like that couple last week I just referred to, was $684,000. We had another couple a few days prior to them. It was something like $485,000 that they were saving. So these are big numbers. They're really big numbers. We've had seven figures, over $1 million in savings, be able to be generated by people who commit to liberating themselves from this tax yoke by, paying the tax now so that they can be tax-free later. Come visit with us. That's where we excel.
Investment advisory services offered through Golden Years Financial LLC, a registered investment advisory firm. Insurance is offered through Golden Years Insurance Services. These firms do not provide legal or tax advice. Consult your own legal and tax advisors before taking actions that may have tax implications. Investing in securities involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Insurance contracts' principal protection is based on the claim-paying ability of the respective insurer. None of the information contained on this website shall constitute an offer to sell or solicit to buy a security or insurance product. The information and opinions contained on this site or requested from this site are provided by third parties believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. They are provided for informational purposes only and are not a solicitation to buy or sell any of the products mentioned. Any media logos and or trademarks contained herein are the property of their respective owners, and no endorsement by those owners of Mark Cordner, Golden Years Financial, or Golden Years Insurance is stated or implied.